Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Pfeiffer. This is Conversations on Retail. We're so excited that you're here with us today. My conversation today is with Andy Ruben, and for those of you that jumped on a few minutes early, you got to hear a couple of old acquaintances, a couple old friends catching up. We did some time together at Walmart. It seems like an eternity ago, but Andy's gone on to do some really exciting things. And so Andy, by the way, Andy's now he's a founder and executive chairman of a company called Trove, and you'll have an opportunity to hear more about that. But Andy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me back.
Yeah. So I actually put this in writing, and I normally don't do this, but I want to make sure that I say it precisely right. So I would say that I am not a climate change denier, but I've been very skeptical, if not cynical, about an awful lot, purely as a function of my personal and professional upbringing. When I was with Walmart, I think sustainability seemed to be mostly about the things that we ought to be doing. And while it felt really sincere, it was obvious to me that it was from my point of view, it was a secondary priority that we'd embrace to the extent that it didn't impact our core business. But I say that to say, as I've gotten to know you better in preparing for this conversation, my eyes have already been opened, and I'm already seeing a few things differently. So I've really been looking forward to this conversation for that reason. So I want to kind of break this
Awesome.
30-minute conversation into three parts. I want to talk about your early career, and you and I kind of have something in common in the sense that we kind of accidentally showed up at Walmart. We kind of accidentally had this career in retail. I want to talk about, and you'll know what this means. Obviously, the other folks will learn as we get to it. But I want to talk about what bit you, right? And then the third thing is your journey with Trove. So introduce yourself. Introduce at a very high level. Talk about what Trove is today, please.
Sure. So, boy, it's almost hard to not start at the beginning. Trove powers some of the brands that people on this or anyone would know of: Lululemon, Patagonia, REI, Nordstrom, massive brands and retailers. And what we do for those brands and retailers, we provide the technology that allows them to get items sitting in our homes or closets or garages that are not being used. So I bought a pair of skis at REI. I'm going to get a new pair of skis. Our technology allows you to bring those pair of skis you're not using anymore back to a REI co-op, get money for them, which goes toward the new pair of skis. Then those skis get processed, pathed, and basically introduced back into formal retail, just like a new pair of skis. Only now, instead of buying the $200 skis, I can afford the $600 skis used. So what happens is ultimately REI gets more loyalty and new customer acquisition. The skis that were already made on this planet get more use, and all of us get access to better goods. And so you could think about it as just another implication of technology in today's age, which allows us to do more and operate in a smarter way.
Yeah. And by the way, I skipped something really important at the very beginning in my excitement to get this conversation started. The reason we call it Conversations on Retail, and the reason that we invite folks to more than listen in, we want you to be a part of the conversation. So if you've got questions that you'd like to submit for Andy to answer, or if you've got some feedback based on your own experience, hit the Q&A button within
Awesome.
Zoom. We're not going to turn on your microphone or on your camera, but submit those questions to me and be a part of the conversation. So Andy, you grew up outside Columbus, Ohio, right?
Yes. Can we go back to the climate comment though? It's
Please.
So hard for me to go past that. Awesome.
Please.
So one of the things about, I think it's such a good it's a super important conversation. One of the things about climate or greenhouse gas or sustainability or whatever the words are, one of the things about the broad scope of what we do as society, right, in the context and how we live, is that you can't disconnect these things from other things. Yeah. So as we look forward and we look at what happens to a shirt we no longer wear, or what things we shop for, how those things are made, you can't just say, I'm going to look at things in this little box and not think about anything else. Because if you do, you're going to be run over by change and competition. because other people will think about a more complete system. And in doing that, they will come up with new ways of adding value in the world that you might not, because you've got a very narrow view. And so one of the things about sustainability, regardless of belief set, is that it helps open people's eyes to a much broader range of broader context.
Yeah.
And that creates incredible advantage. Belief set one way, another way, three ways, doesn't matter. Yeah. It is an important consideration. And that connectedness and sustainability is so broad that if you're not doing that, you are missing landscape. And I think that was, in many ways, Walmart would talk about taking off a pair of business glasses, putting on a different pair of glasses to see the world in a bigger, broader way, like Peter Redmond being on fishing boats, just seeing the world in a broader way, then putting back on your business glasses and saying, wow, why wouldn't we source differently? That's smarter. Oh my gosh, look, we're going to save customers money here. We're going to better seafood there, right? And so you can't disconnect those things regardless of belief set. As a business practitioner, it's important to have a broad perspective.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, and again, I kind of have an idea where I want to go, but I think we're probably not going to go in any way that I might anticipate, and that's absolutely fine. But I think a lot of us thought that when Walmart started talking sustainability, it was kind of the first time around, right? It was like this new thing, but there had been conversations about it in years past. It didn't stick in the same ways.
Yeah, there was actually a lot of conversation. So I was involved in sustainability with Walmart 2004 to 2007 directly, right? So it's kind of the restarting, because we went back and looked 10 years earlier, and that's when Hillary Clinton was on the Walmart board at that point. Sam Walton had a number of letters back and forth with Hillary and other board members about a super center in, I can't remember the state, and I don't want to get it wrong, but there were conversations 10 years prior, again, looking at this broader frame of reference and what the opportunity set was. Now, it died down for about 10 years and came back in the mid 2000s when I was a part of that. That was when Lee gave 21st Century Leadership that speech. If you fast forward almost 20 years again to where we are now, there is a change. So I think in the mid 2000s, when 21st Century Leadership, that speech and other efforts, the concept of eco-efficiency is an obvious one. So if I can save money or save a customer money based on having a TV converter use less power when it's not on, better for the customer, better for everybody, right? Good for everybody. Eco-efficiency. There is another realm of sustainability that we're in right now, which is solely about the production that we have on the planet. It's the amount of things that produced and sold. And that's what brings us to Trove in a more circular conversation, which is there is no amount of math in the world we make 150 billion textiles a year, every year, 150 billion for 8 billion humans. There is no amount of math to make 150 billion garments less bad enough to make that work. Now, you can say that's a problem. It's not a problem. It'll take care of itself, whatever it is. It is going to change. No one thinks we're going to go from 150 to 500 billion. And so anyone who looks at that question, forget the values-laden sustainability conversation. Anyone who looks at that says, what is going to happen? We as average customers bought 86 items last year. So in 2021, we purchased, 64. The average US customer bought 64 pieces of textile garments, 12 in the 1980s. So we went from 12 in the 1980s to 64 in 2021. Do people think it's going to go to 100? And so the question becomes, as a brand or a retailer, how do you stay in service of the customer, and how do you stay ahead of not what the world looks like today, but what it will look like? And what are the bets you're placing today to think about that? And that's the experience I have now with these companies like Lululemon and REI and Patagonia and Nordstrom of just place some bets and start to understand what happens. Are there ways to add value here? Because those are unlocks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You shared a statistic, and this is one of the things that really got my attention and caused me to maybe come into this conversation with a slightly different perspective, or at least more of an open mind. Is you said that 20% of the value from an item is realized by its first owner. 20%.
Yeah, it's amazing. The same with and we as a society look at clothing and say, oh, that's interesting. All right, going about our lives. When you look at a car, before there was, Uber and Lyft and other things, a car sits idle 92% of its life. So we purchase a car for $35,000, right, as humans in the US. And then we use it 8% of the time. Now, the idea that like you don't need to be driving around all day, so you're never going to all of a sudden use your car 100% of its time, or even 18% of its time. But the idea that you could jump in a car that someone else is driving around nonstop, just a lot more efficient. And so these models aren't rocket science, right? They're just practical models of getting more output from the input we spend.
Yeah.
These are low cost models.
Yeah.
They're just not done in the way that we might not. They're not done in the way the world looks today. They're done in the way the world will look. And that's where the opportunity sits.
Yeah. So let me back up a little bit. What bit you? Where did your curiosity and passion come from? You're an engineer by training, and that's how you ended up in that role at Walmart, because it's all about fixing process. But when did you really connect with it? When did you really own it?
Gosh, there were 2 points. One was a pretty well, in my mind, it was an argument with Tom Coughlin. I don't know if he would view it as an argument, but I remember a challenge with this store in Missouri. It was a super center selling graphic calculators. And it was kind of one of the first store visits of the morning, where you walk up to the photo counter at that point, and we're looking at the book, and the photo manager's going through and looking at the comp sales of graphic calculators. It's back to school season, and they were flat. And it was like a shocking moment. And it was Lamar, Missouri. And I remember thinking, maybe every high schooler doing trigonometry has a graphic calculator. Like, how do you sell 6% more graphic calculators if everybody has one? Maybe instead of looking at comp sales, we should look at market share. So I go back and I sit in Tom's office and say, because I'm leading US strategy at that point. I say, Tom, we've got it all wrong. We shouldn't look at comps. We should look at market share by category, and we should measure merchants on market share, not comp. And he was clearly right at the time. His point was, that is convoluted and we'll never measure anything. Like, we've got to have a simple way that you absolutely know, right? You can't have this back and forth. So that was a moment for me, but I didn't know what to do with it, because I think in the end, in terms of building a business, comp sales made a lot more sense. Fast forward probably 10 years, and I'd been through sustainability at Walmart. I'd then taken on kind of the private brand operations, Great Value, Old Roy, Special Kitty, Equate, Walmart private brands. And I realized that we couldn't save our way to a better model. Like, we couldn't take enough plastic or resin out of a fork because we just sold more. So I remember driving down the freeway, 540 at that point, and I was using Waze, which Waze had just launched, and Waze helps you directionally. And Waze told me that I would save time if I left 8 minutes later than I was planning to leave. I'd get to work at the same time. Yeah. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, Waze is going to help me optimize time on the road. Waze is going to help optimize the freeway, not miles per gallon of my car. And it just struck me as one of the things we have to think about for the stuff in our lives. We have to think about this stuff in our lives, not for how much we can buy a shirt for, but the only way we're going to be able to save money at some point on a shirt is if we get more use out of the shirt. We're optimizing one small piece of the overall picture, and that broader picture is what has value for me. So if I can get a Tom Ford dress shirt instead of a Banana Republic shirt for the same price, I'm never walking in a Banana Republic again.
Yeah.
And that is what we're facing right now, as hundreds of millions of items in our closet and then billions of items come back into formal retail. And they are.
Again, the cynic in me, when I started learning about Trove, well before our conversation, I was like, you're helping these brands create marketplaces to facilitate the reselling of their products. And I thought, there's already a marketplace. It's garage sales. It's, you're donating to these different places. What you've done though is you've created incentive. As I look at my own closet and I see 80% of what's in there I will never wear again. I know this.
Yeah.
So you've created incentive for the consumer to part with it, and you've somehow created incentive for the brands to sell it. And I say somehow because it would seem like there would be this cannibalization of their core business by bringing in old inventory. How did you figure that part of it out? How did you the breakthrough in the consumer side makes all kinds of sense, but how did you convince these brands to buy back their old stuff?
They make more money doing it. Right. I mean, it's as pure and simple as that. And they make more money through, customer loyalty. So on average, when people bring, right now, there are roughly 400 Lululemon stores in the US today. Every one of them, you have any piece of any garment that says Lululemon, you walk it back in a Lululemon store, you get a gift card. Now, what that's created is incremental trips to stores, because people who know that say, oh, what am I going to do today? I've got a pair of yoga pants I just haven't worn in a year. I'll walk it back. And if we're honest about why they want to trade it in at Lululemon, yes, it's good in the world, but really they want a new pair of yoga pants. They want to shop, and they're going to bring that back in. And it's not a discount on the new pair. It's not a coupon. It's not on sale, but it is a discount, right? They're getting money back for something they're no longer wearing. It feels good. They lightweight, and they're able to trade into what they need now. And that pair of yoga pants then gets resold to what is a customer that's always wanted to be part of the Lululemon brand, the community, but hasn't had that opportunity because they might not be able to afford that high-end pair of yoga pants. So ultimately, is there going to be a case where that pair of yoga pants replaces the new one? Of course. But we've got a lot of data on this, and we don't see much of it. And it would be very akin to the 2000s with e-commerce. Do you sell someone something online they would have bought in a store? Maybe, but the reality is they're buying the used Lululemon yoga pant on eBay, whether Lululemon is selling it or not. Or they're going to buy it on ThredUp or the Real or Vestiaire or Tradesy. So the same is they're going to shop online through phones.com, whether or not you have an online presence. Yeah. When a customer makes a shift, the retailer or brand choice is not, is that shift, do we want that shift or not? The customer is deciding that, not the retailer or brand. What the brand has the ability to say is to recognize that and decide how that benefits them, and to be on the front end of that as opposed to on their heels. And so there's minimal cannibalization. It is tiny. The upside is far greater, and that's what the brands work with.
Well, and the dots that I was finally able to connect, again, as I was kind of thinking this through ahead of our call, was if I, as a consumer, understand that my purchase is going to have some residual value beyond the 50 cents I get for it at a garage sale, or the good feeling that I get from donating it, it's going to impact my willingness to spend on that premium, the new product, because I know that when I'm done with it, it does have significant residual value.
And we will see that. Fast forward 5-10 years, we will see shelf tags that say, hey, this Billy bookcase at IKEA, 85% of customers are able to resell this for, if the Billy bookcase is $35, 85% of customers get $20 back. Yeah. Oh, what's my real cost now? $15. And we're already seeing, I've got two kids. I've got a 15 and 17-year-old, about to be 18, who was born the week we had the first milestone meeting for sustainability, which is fascinating, at Walmart. So they have never worn Patagonia because they grow every year. Now we walk in every year, they get a used Patagonia jacket. Every year we walk back in, we trade the used one in. So we spend $65 on a Patagonia jacket used, we trade it back in for $35. It's like a $25 or $30 jacket. What would that jacket cost us at Target, Walmart, Costco, Sam's? $40. So we have a less expensive jacket because we are one of 10 users. And every time we're buying from Patagonia, we trust it. We just walk back in, hand the jacket back. We don't post it. We don't take pictures. None of that. Walk in, hand it back. And so where do we go to buy jackets? Patagonia. Patagonia has, back to the market share Tom Coughlin conversation, Patagonia is increasing market share. They're owning a greater share of outdoor wear in this occasion. And they are perpetuating a model to get not just the 20% of value out of that jacket, but closer to 100%. It's good for everybody.
Yeah, brilliant. So we'll be wrapping up with Andy in the next, 6 or 7 minutes. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and submit those now. Andy, Trove has raised an awful lot of money. It's been, reported, and congratulations on the success of your team and the confidence you've been able to, get from the investment community to come along with you. What's next? And I think the real question I want to ask is, what are the limits? Is there an application for this at Walmart? Is there an application for this at Target? And at what point will you begin to touch those channels and chains?
Well, Target and Walmart are already participating. If you look at Walmart.com, the number of pre-owned, pre-loved, used, whatever you call it, resale items is it's significant. I mean, even by Walmart, it's measurable by Walmart standards. Let's not call it significant. Okay. Target just launched the same in apparel. Neither company, I don't believe either company is truly owning the strategy of this yet. It's more of like a dip a toe in the water. That will at some point, just like e-commerce, merit a true strategy for both of those broadline marketplaces. Amazon's been doing this for 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. I'm looking at Item Authority. I'm looking at a pair of Apple AirPods, 23 offers, new and used. Let the customer decide. The new ones are 300. The used ones are 200. You make a choice.
Yeah.
Okay. We can shift that. Think of supply chain. When REI resells bikes and they cannot get bikes into the store during COVID, where do they go? Garages. Just gives you more resilience in supply chain. Is there a limit to it? Of course there is, but we are so far from that limit. We are 1% to 2% right now in a formalized sense. This will be 30% of units, zero doubt on my mind. This will be 30% of units, 15% of sales. So the distance between here and there is so significant. And I had the same surety back in 2001 when people would say, of course, you're going to buy media online, but you'll never buy apparel online. I remember those days. Yeah. You'll never buy food online, right? That'd be crazy. Mm-hmm. It just, in the end, why this makes sense is because it makes sense for us as customers. And when it makes sense for customers, then it makes sense for brands and retailers, because brands and retailers serve the customer.
And at some point, and obviously this doesn't apply to consumable goods, of course, but at some point, talk of supply chain pressures would be nearly non-existent, because there would be a nearly infinite supply of used goods that could be reintroduced to the market and
absolutely. So then you think of a kid's bike. You'll buy your first and last kid's bike at REI. And there are a handful of REIs right now where you just walk any kid's bike back into an REI and get a gift card. And then it's Trove technology that sits at REI that says, okay, how much do you buy that bike back for? Where does the bike go? Does the bike have room for 10 in that local co-op? Is that listed in every co-op or just in that co-op? Because, by the way, you can move a bike between co-ops way easier, and we can ship a bike. You just start to look at what the value is in the items that we produce and how you get more value out of it. And then that becomes a customer proposition. I buy my first and last kid's bike at REI. Of course, I pick up elbow pads and helmet every time I'm there, maybe a Cliff Bar. So it is, this is still core, same as it's ever been, core retail economics, value creation, and being customer centric.
Yeah. I've heard you say something to the effect of 20 years from now, we're going to be wondering why in the world it took us so long to figure this out. What will it look like in 20 years? And more importantly, what are the barriers that we as consumers and as brands, we're going to have to overcome in order to get there?
Yeah. Really good questions. I think as we look back, imagine what doesn't really matter, 20 years from now, we look back, I imagine having conversation with someone young, right? And they say, what do you used to do with your skis when you're no longer using them? And I'd say, oh yeah, we just left them in the garage. Well, then what'd you do with them? Eventually, what'd you do? And we'd say, yeah, eventually we filled the car with them and just dropped them off at Goodwill, most of which were burned and buried because we had them. And they'd say, gosh, that is so ridiculous. And it would just be like right now saying, Yeah, we would rent a movie, and in the end, we had to rewind it, or else Blockbuster would charge us $2.
Hmm.
Like the idea of how life advances, and we look back and realize how unsophisticated we are now compared to thinking about this 20% of value or less. There's a large percentage of apparel bought at Walmart and Target where the tags never come off because people buy 3 sizes and just never take it back. Right? There is a large amount of value being lost here. And in terms of the barriers to getting there, the biggest barrier is the ease for all of us as customers. When things already have value, if we can get money for the things we bought before, if we can find things for less money, no one has to convince us of anything. Everyone gets that. What is harder is that for Lululemon, the adoption of bring your Lululemon back to a store and get a gift card, that adoption will happen through brands. Brands are so central in our lives. And because of that, brands have the opportunity to invite us to just make it easy. So as brands do that because they benefit, that's why I'm sitting here right now in the world in this space. Because as more brands do that, we'll shop at Patagonia and an Arc'teryx and an REI and say, why doesn't North Face do this? Or why doesn't, it's just an expectation. Yeah. And with that, there are people on the front and there are people falling off the back like any trend. And I want to accelerate that trend.
Yeah. There've got to be certain categories that are much easier to drive adoption than others. And in apparel, again, yeah. I don't know, but it would just seem as though apparel, you can pick it up and you can look it over and you're going to, with your own eye, be able to see any kind of flaw that exists where, you know, electronics, much like buying a used car, you can really doll up the outside, but you have no idea what's going on the inside. So I think the safer that consumers begin to feel with these brands, taking care of them in the event of a bad experience and so forth, I think it's going to drive a heck of a lot more adoption.
And that's where the brands play. So if anyone who's ever bought an iPhone where they ask if you have one you want to trade in, right? I mean, that is the perfect moment. And there were a bunch of third-party sellers before Apple was doing that. And I never thought about reselling my iPhone 4 because I had my iPhone 5 and it's in the drawer. Yeah. When I'm buying my iPhone 13 and Apple says you get $500 off and you hand back your iPhone 12, great. And then they resell that. And Apple certifies that. It comes in Apple packaging. It's got the wrap around it. It comes with a 12-month warranty. I'm speaking to you right now on an Apple MacBook that's used. And when it comes from Apple, I trust that. And that's the role that brands can play. And in terms of categories, of course, there's a lot of apparel. But my gosh, I spent a lot of money on, I'd like a nicer coffee maker if I could afford it. And everyone's got 2 or 3 coffee makers in their closet somewhere they're not using. And so there are plenty of home appliances. Think of tools, hardware, lawn and garden. Just walk through a store. I mean, we're not talking peanut butter here, but walk through the general merchandise in the store, and almost every category has a premium side and an entry-level price point, and the ability to get nicer items for less money and to get more use out of them exists fairly universally. Just need better business models, brands, and retailers.
Yeah. Andy, this has been so much fun. Congratulations to you and to your team on the success that you've had. But I'm going to say something now that I'll probably mean a lot more in 20 years. Thank you so much for what it is that you're doing today and the difference that it's making now, but especially the differences that we're going to be realizing 10, 20 years down the road. Andy Ruben, founder and executive chairman of Trove. Again, thank you so much for making the time to do this. It's been so much fun for me, and best of wishes to you and your team going forward.
Matt, thank you.
Have a great day. So long.
You too.